A 19-year-old black girl stands before 50 reporters, cameras flashing like lightning. Behind her, the American Eagle logo gleams. The airline CEO stands beside her, sweat beading on his pale forehead. She leans into the microphone and says calmly, "5 minutes. That's all it took to change everything." But what happened in those 5 minutes? Let me take you back to Gate B-17, Atlanta International Airport. Before we dive into this incredible story, I want to know where you are watching from today. Drop your location in the comments below. And if you believe everyone deserves to be treated with dignity, regardless of their skin color, hit that like button right now and subscribe to this channel. Trust me, what happens next will leave you absolutely speechless. Now, let us begin. Her name was Imani Washington, and on that sweltering Saturday morning in August, she believed with every fiber of her being that her life was about to change forever. She was right about that, though not in the way she expected. Imani was 19 years old, a girl whose skin was the rich color of dark chocolate, whose natural curls were pulled back into a neat bun, and whose simple but carefully pressed clothes spoke of someone who took pride in her appearance despite not having much money to spend on fashion. She carried herself with a quiet dignity that belied her young age. Her shoulders straight, her chin lifted just slightly, the posture of someone who had learned early that the world would try to push her down and had decided long ago not to let it. Imani had grown up in Southside Atlanta, in a neighborhood where gunshots sometimes punctuated the night, and where opportunity was something you heard about on television rather than experienced firsthand. She had been raised by her grandmother, Eleanor, a woman of 78 years who had worked 3 jobs simultaneously for most of her life just to keep food on the table and a roof over their heads. Eleanor had cleaned houses for wealthy white families in Buckhead during the day, worked the evening shift at a laundromat, folding other people's clothes, and on weekends, she had sold homemade pound cakes at the local flea market. Her hands were rough and calloused, her back permanently bent from years of labor. But her spirit remained unbroken, and she had poured every ounce of her strength into raising Imani to be something more than their circumstances suggested was possible. Imani's mother, Denise, had died of ovarian cancer when Imani was just 12 years old. The illness had been discovered too late, as it often was for black women who lacked access to quality health care. And Denise had faded away over the course of 8 agonizing months, while Imani watched helplessly. Before she died, Denise had written her daughter a letter, pressing it into the girl's trembling hands during one of her final lucid moments. "Fly high, my baby girl," the letter read in Denise's increasingly shaky handwriting. "Break every ceiling they put above you. Promise me." Imani had promised, and she had kept that letter with her every day since, carrying it in her wallet like a sacred talisman. Her father had left when she was 3 years old, disappearing into the night like so many fathers in their neighborhood did, leaving behind nothing but a faded photograph and a lifetime of questions that would never be answered. Imani had stopped wondering about him years ago. She had her grandmother, and that was enough. That had to be enough. But now, standing in Gate B-17 of Atlanta International Airport, Imani was about to embark on a journey that would have seemed like pure fantasy just a few years earlier. She had earned a full scholarship to Harvard Law School, one of the most prestigious institutions in the entire country. She was the first person in her family to attend college, let alone an Ivy League university. The scholarship covered everything, including tuition, room and board, books, and even a small stipend for living expenses. It was the kind of opportunity that came along once in a generation, if it came along at all, and Imani was determined not to waste a single moment of it. She had arrived at the airport early, a full hour before boarding was scheduled to begin, because she had never flown before, and she was terrified of making some mistake that would cause her to miss her flight. She found a quiet corner near the windows and sat down with her carry-on bag, an old rolling suitcase that had belonged to her mother and still bore the faded remnants of stickers from a trip to Disney World that Denise had taken as a child. Inside the suitcase, carefully wrapped in tissue paper, were the most precious items Imani owned, including the only family photograph that had survived a fire in their apartment building when she was 15, a delicate gold bracelet that Eleanor had given her on graduation day. And of course, her mother's letter. The suitcase also contained practical items like toiletries, a few changes of clothes, and the thick orientation packet from Harvard that she had read so many times the pages were starting to wear thin at the corners. She pulled out the packet now and flipped through it again, her heart racing with a mixture of excitement and terror. In just a few hours, she would be walking across the same campus where Supreme Court justices and presidents had studied. She, Imani Washington, from Southside Atlanta, would be sitting in classrooms where the future leaders of America learned to argue and advocate and change the world. Eleanor had wanted desperately to accompany her granddaughter to the airport, but her health had declined sharply in recent months. Her diabetes had worsened, her blood pressure was dangerously high, and her doctor had strictly forbidden any unnecessary exertion. So instead, Eleanor had said goodbye at their small apartment that morning, holding Imani's face between her weathered palms and staring into her eyes with an intensity that made Imani's throat tighten with emotion. "You go out there and show them what you're made of," Eleanor had said, her voice thick with tears she was trying not to shed. "You make your mama proud. You make me proud. You make yourself proud." Imani had hugged her grandmother so tightly she was afraid she might hurt her. And then she had forced herself to walk out the door because she knew if she stayed one more minute she might never leave at all. The gate area was filled with other passengers waiting for Flight 2847 to Boston. Imani noticed businessmen in expensive suits, tapping away at laptops, families with small children trying to keep them entertained, elderly couples holding hands, young professionals scrolling through their phones. She also noticed, though she tried not to dwell on it, that she was one of only a handful of black passengers in the first-class waiting area. The ticket she held in her hand, which entitled her to a seat in first class, had been provided by a charitable organization that awarded luxury travel experiences to exceptional scholarship recipients. It was meant to be a celebration, a small taste of the success that awaited her if she worked hard and stayed focused. Imani had never flown first class before. She had never flown at all. As she sat there, reading her orientation materials, the gate agent's voice crackled over the loudspeaker. "Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. American Eagle Flight 2847, with service to Boston, is now ready for boarding. At this time, we would like to invite our first-class passengers and those requiring special assistance to begin boarding." Imani's heart leaped into her throat. This was it. She carefully tucked the orientation packet back into her carry-on, checked to make sure her boarding pass was easily accessible, and stood up on legs that felt suddenly unsteady. She joined the short line of first-class passengers making their way toward the jet bridge, trying to project a confidence she did not entirely feel. She belonged here. She had earned the right to be here. Her mother had believed in her. Her grandmother believed in her. And now, finally, she was going to prove that their faith had been justified. She had no way of knowing that in less than 5 minutes someone would try to convince her that she did not belong anywhere at all. The line moved quickly, and within moments Imani found herself approaching the entrance to the jet bridge, where airline personnel were checking boarding passes and welcoming passengers aboard. That was when she first laid eyes on Patricia Whitmore, and though she could not have articulated it at the time, something about the woman immediately made her uneasy. Patricia was 45 years old, a senior flight attendant who had been with American Eagle for 2 decades, and who carried herself with the smug self-assurance of someone who believed her longevity entitled her to respect and deference. Her blonde hair was cut in a severe bob that framed a face permanently arranged in an expression of professional pleasantness that did not quite reach her ice-blue eyes. Her makeup was immaculate, her uniform pressed to crisp perfection, and her smile was the kind of smile that retail workers and flight attendants perfected over years of practice. Technically correct but utterly devoid of genuine warmth. Patricia had been passed over for promotion twice in the past 3 years, and she blamed affirmative action policies that she believed unfairly advantaged less qualified candidates. She never said this out loud, of course. She had learned to keep her opinions private, to express them only in the company of people she trusted to agree with her. But the bitterness festered inside her like an infection, coloring her perceptions and influencing her behavior in ways she was not always conscious of. When Patricia saw Imani approaching with a first-class boarding pass, something shifted behind her eyes. It was subtle, a slight narrowing, a barely perceptible tightening of the muscles around her mouth. But it was there. She had seen black passengers in first class before, of course. It was not uncommon, but something about this girl, with her natural hair and her simple clothes and her obvious nervousness, triggered every prejudice Patricia had spent years cultivating beneath her professional veneer. "Excuse me, miss," Patricia said as Imani reached the front of the line, her voice carrying that particular tone of condescension that some people perfect when speaking to those they consider beneath them. "Economy boarding is at the back of the line." Imani felt heat rise to her cheeks, but she kept her voice calm and polite. "I have a first-class ticket, Mom." She held up her boarding pass so Patricia could see it clearly. Patricia's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "First class? Let me see that." She did not phrase it as a request. She snatched the boarding pass from Imani's hand and examined it with the intensity of a customs agent searching for contraband. She turned it over, held it up to the light, ran her fingernail along the edge as if checking for signs of forgery. Imani stood there, feeling exposed and humiliated, as other passengers in line behind her began to shift impatiently. "Where did you get this ticket?" Patricia asked, her tone making it clear she suspected the answer would be incriminating. Imani swallowed her pride and explained. "It was provided by a scholarship organization. I'm starting at Harvard Law School, and they awarded me first-class travel as part of the scholarship package." Patricia's eyebrows rose in an expression of exaggerated surprise. "A scholarship, right." She drew out the word scholarship as if it were synonymous with handout or charity case. Behind her, another flight attendant named Helen was watching the exchange with an uncomfortable expression, clearly aware that something inappropriate was happening but unwilling to intervene. Patricia leaned slightly toward Helen and spoke in a stage whisper that was clearly intended to be overheard. "These affirmative action kids think they belong everywhere now." The words hit Imani like a physical blow. She felt her stomach clench, felt tears prick at the backs of her eyes. But she refused to give Patricia the satisfaction of seeing her cry. She had dealt with racism before. Growing up black in America meant dealing with racism. But she had never expected it here. Not at this moment. Not when she was about to embark on the greatest adventure of her life. Patricia handed back the boarding pass with visible reluctance. "Fine. Go ahead." But her tone made it clear that she was doing Imani a favor, granting permission rather than acknowledging a right. Imani walked through the jet bridge and onto the plane, her heart pounding with a mixture of anger and humiliation. She found her seat, 3A, a window seat, in the first-class cabin, and she sat down carefully, placing her carry-on in the overhead compartment and trying to make herself as small and unobtrusive as possible. She just wanted to get to Boston. She just wanted to start her new life. She did not want any more confrontations. But the confrontation was far from over. The passenger, assigned to seat 3B, arrived a few minutes later. His name was Richard Morrison, a 50-year-old business executive with silver hair, a custom-tailored suit, and the confident bearing of a man accustomed to having the world arrange itself according to his preferences. He took one look at Imani sitting in the seat next to his, and his expression immediately soured. He stood in the aisle for a long moment, making a show of checking his boarding pass and then checking the seat numbers, as if there must surely be some mistake. Then he pressed the call button and waited. Patricia arrived within seconds, her professional smile firmly in place. "How can I help you, sir?" Richard leaned close to Patricia and spoke in a low voice, though not low enough to prevent Imani from hearing every word. "Are you sure she's supposed to be here? I paid $8,000 for this seat." Patricia's smile widened slightly, and something dark flickered in her eyes. "I understand your concern, sir. Let me handle this." Imani's blood ran cold. She watched as Patricia turned toward her, the false smile now carrying an undertone of triumph. "Miss, I need you to come with me." "Is there a problem?" Imani asked, her voice steady, despite the fear coursing through her veins. "We need to verify your ticket. Please step outside the aircraft." Imani knew she had done nothing wrong. She knew her ticket was legitimate. But she also knew that making a scene in an airplane could result in her being removed from the flight entirely, possibly even arrested. She had heard the stories, seen the viral videos of black passengers being dragged off planes for minor infractions, or no infractions at all. So she stood up, gathered her dignity around her like armor, and followed Patricia back down the aisle toward the exit. They walked through the aircraft door and onto the jet bridge, the enclosed walkway that connected the plane to the terminal. The jet bridge sloped downward toward the gate, and the metal floor clanged slightly under their feet. Other passengers were no longer boarding. The door to the terminal had been closed temporarily while Patricia dealt with this issue. When they were about halfway down the jet bridge, completely out of sight of anyone on the plane or in the terminal, Patricia stopped abruptly and turned to face Imani. The professional mask had fallen away entirely now, replaced by an expression of pure contempt. "Look," Patricia said, her voice low and venomous. "I don't know how you got that ticket. Maybe you stole it. Maybe you scammed some liberal do-gooder organization. I don't really care. But people like you don't belong in first class. You don't belong on this plane at all. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to turn around and walk back to that terminal, and you're going to tell them you missed your flight. You're going to do it quietly, and you're not going to make a scene. And if you're smart, you'll go back to wherever you came from and stay there." Imani felt as if all the air had been sucked out of the jet bridge. For a moment, she could not breathe, could not think, could not process the magnitude of what was happening. Then something inside her, something forged in the fires of a childhood, marked by loss and struggle and the constant message that she had to be twice as good to get half as far, that something refused to bend. "No," Imani said, her voice surprisingly strong. "I have a legitimate ticket. I earned my place on this flight, and I earned my place at Harvard. You cannot do this to me." Patricia's face contorted with rage. "Don't you dare talk back to me. I've been doing this job for 20 years. I will not be disrespected by some ghetto." She did not finish the sentence. Instead, she placed both hands on Imani's chest and shoved with all her strength. Imani was not a large person. She weighed barely 115 pounds, and she had been standing on a downward slope in shoes with smooth soles. She never had a chance. Her feet went out from under her, and she tumbled backward down the jet bridge, her body rolling and bouncing against the metal floor and walls. She fell perhaps 10 feet before she came to a stop, her right shoulder screaming with pain, her left knee burning where the skin had been scraped away against the rough metal surface. Her carry-on suitcase had flown from her hand during the fall, and it now lay on its side several feet away, the zipper partially open, its contents spilling across the floor. Imani saw her mother's photograph lying face down near the wall. and when she crawled toward it and picked it up, she discovered that the glass in the frame had shattered. Through her tears, she saw the delicate gold bracelet her grandmother had given her, the one Eleanor had saved for months to buy. Rolling toward a gap between the jet bridge floor and the wall, she lunged for it, but she was too slow. The bracelet disappeared into the crack, lost forever. From above, Patricia looked down at her with an expression of cold satisfaction. She tripped, Patricia announced to no one in particular, practicing the lie she would tell. Clumsy girl. Then, she turned and walked back toward the aircraft, leaving Imani lying on the floor of the jet bridge, bleeding and crying and more alone than she had ever felt in her life. A moment later, a ground crew employee named Gregory came running down the jet bridge. He was a young black man, maybe 25 years old, and his face was twisted with concern. He had seen what happened through the window of the terminal. He had seen everything. "Miss, are you okay? Can you move? Let me help you." He knelt beside her and helped her sit up, his hands gentle despite his obvious distress. "I saw that. I saw what she did to you. That was wrong. That was so wrong. But what could he do? He was just a ground crew worker. He had no power, no authority, no ability to make anyone listen." He helped Imani to her feet, helped her gather her scattered belongings, and walked with her back up to the terminal while she tried to stop crying long enough to figure out what to do next. Her knee was bleeding through her pants. Her shoulder throbbed with every movement. Her grandmother's bracelet was gone forever. Her mother's photograph was damaged beyond repair. And her flight, the flight that was supposed to carry her toward her dreams, had departed without her. The customer service counter was staffed by a young woman named Melissa who looked genuinely sympathetic when Imani approached with tears streaming down her face and blood seeping through the knee of her pants. Melissa listened as Imani tried to explain what had happened, her words tumbling out in a disjointed rush as she struggled to maintain her composure. To her credit, Melissa did not dismiss Imani immediately. She made soothing noises and offered tissues and said she would call her manager right away. The manager who responded was a middle-aged white man named Derek Collins, whose crisp uniform and practiced smile could not quite conceal the wariness in his eyes. He was the shift manager for American Eagle at Atlanta International, a position of moderate authority that came with moderate pay and moderate stress, and absolutely zero tolerance for situations that might escalate into anything resembling a scandal. Derek had spent 15 years cultivating the ability to make problems disappear quietly. And as Imani described what had happened on the jet bridge, he was already mentally cataloging the various ways he could make this particular problem go away. "Let me make sure I understand," Derek said in the carefully neutral tone of someone who has been trained in conflict de-escalation. "You're saying that Patricia Whitmore, one of our senior flight attendants with an exemplary 20-year record, physically pushed you down the jet bridge because of your race?" "Yes," Imani said, her voice ragged but determined. "That's exactly what I'm saying. She told me that people like me don't belong in first class. She told me to go back where I came from. And then she pushed me." Derek's expression flickered with something that might have been discomfort before settling back into professional neutrality. "That's a very serious accusation. You understand that, don't you? Patricia has been with this company for 2 decades. She has never had a single complaint filed against her." That was not entirely true. Patricia had received several complaints over the years from passengers who felt they had been treated rudely or dismissively, but those complaints had come from minority passengers, and they had been quietly buried in the system, dismissed as misunderstandings or exaggerations. Derek knew this because he had personally helped bury some of them. It was just easier that way. It avoided confrontation. It kept the peace. "I'm not making this up," Imani said, desperation creeping into her voice. "I'm bleeding, my shoulder is injured. I lost my grandmother's bracelet down a crack in the jet bridge. Why would I make this up? Derek sighed heavily, as if Imani was being unreasonable. Let me get Patricia's side of the story before we jump to any conclusions. He picked up his radio and called Patricia, who appeared at the customer service counter within minutes, still wearing her uniform and her professional smile. She looked at Imani with an expression of exaggerated concern that made Imani want to scream. "Oh, the poor girl," Patricia said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "What happened is that she tripped on her own shoelace while we were walking down the jet bridge. I tried to catch her, but I couldn't reach her in time. It was very frightening. I do hope she's not seriously hurt." Derek turned to Imani with an expression that clearly said he considered the matter settled. "You see, it was an accident. These things happen." "She's lying," Imani said, her voice rising despite her best efforts to stay calm. "She pushed me. She called me. She said people like me don't belong in first class. She told me to go back where I came from." "Miss, please lower your voice," Derek said sharply. "You're causing a disturbance." Patricia shook her head sadly, her performance of concerned sympathy so convincing that Imani wondered for a moment if she was losing her mind. "Poor thing," Patricia murmured. "She's probably just nervous about flying. First time in an airport, I imagine." The casual cruelty of the assumption. The way Patricia could not even conceive of a young black woman having ever traveled before, cut deeper than any explicit slur. Things deteriorated rapidly from there. Derek, clearly eager to make this problem disappear before it attracted any more attention, called airport security. 2 officers arrived within minutes, both white men with impassive faces and hands resting casually on their belts in a way that made Imani's heart race with fear. Derek explained the situation in terms that made Imani sound like the aggressor, an irate passenger making unsubstantiated accusations against a veteran employee, causing a disturbance at the customer service counter. "I'm sorry, miss," one of the security officers said in a tone that suggested he was not sorry at all, "but we're going to have to ask you to leave the gate area." "But my flight," Imani protested, even though she knew it was futile. "I'm going to miss my flight." The officer exchanged a glance with Derek, who shook his head almost imperceptibly. "I'm afraid your reservation has been canceled due to disruptive behavior," Derek said. "You may contact our customer service line to discuss rebooking options. But for now, I'm going to have to ask you to accompany these officers to a different area of the terminal." Imani looked at Patricia, who was watching the scene with barely concealed satisfaction. Patricia's expression seemed to say, "I told you. You do not belong here. You never did." The security officers escorted Imani away from the gate, past crowds of travelers who stared at her with curiosity and suspicion, past gift shops and restaurants and departure boards, until they deposited her in a general waiting area far from gate B-17. They told her to remain there until her situation could be resolved, and then they left without another word. Imani sat down on a hard plastic chair and finally allowed herself to cry. Really cry. The kind of crying that comes from a place so deep it feels like it might never stop. The kind that leaves you gasping for breath and wondering if you will ever feel whole again. She cried for her missed flight, and her injured shoulder, and her bleeding knee. She cried for her grandmother's bracelet, lost forever, in a crack in a jet bridge. She cried for her mother's photograph, its glass shattered beyond repair. And she cried for herself. For the naive girl who had woken up that morning believing that the world was finally going to give her a chance, that hard work and determination and sacrifice would be rewarded with opportunity and respect. After what felt like hours but was probably only 15 minutes, Imani pulled herself together enough to call her grandmother. She could not bear to tell Eleanor the whole truth, not over the phone, not when Eleanor was already so fragile and worried. "Baby, what happened?" Eleanor's voice was tight with concern. "Are you in Boston already?" "I missed the flight, Grandma." Imani forced herself to sound calm, even casual. There was a mix-up with the boarding. I'll figure it out. I'll get on another flight. Don't worry. Oh, honey. Eleanor sounded so disappointed, so worried, and Imani felt a fresh wave of tears threatening to break through. Are you sure you're okay? I'm fine. Really. I love you, Grandma. I'll call you when I figure out the new plan. After she hung up, Imani sat alone in the waiting area, staring at the shattered glass covering her mother's photograph. I'm sorry, Mama, she whispered. I tried. I really tried. She thought about her mother's letter, still safely tucked in her wallet. Break every ceiling they put above you. But how could she break the ceiling when the ceiling had just fallen on her head? That was when someone sat down in the chair beside her. Imani looked up, ready to tell whoever it was to leave her alone, and found herself looking at an older white woman, with silver hair pulled back in a neat bun and kind eyes behind gold-framed glasses. The woman was dressed simply, in well-made but understated clothes that gave no hint of wealth or status. I saw what happened, sweetheart, the woman said quietly. All of it. She held out a small packet of tissues, and Imani took them automatically, too surprised to do anything else. My name is Dorothy, the woman continued. Dorothy Hartley, and I think you and I need to have a conversation. There was something about Dorothy Hartley that immediately put Imani at ease, despite everything she had just been through. Maybe it was the warmth in her voice, or the genuine concern in her eyes, or the fact that she did not seem to expect anything from Imani except the truth. Whatever it was, Imani found herself pouring out the entire story while Dorothy listened without interruption, her expression growing increasingly grim as the details accumulated. When Imani finished, Dorothy sat in silence for a long moment. Then she reached into her purse and pulled out a business card, which she handed to Imani without comment. Imani looked at the card. It read, Dorothy Hartley, Chairman Emeritus of the Board, American Eagle Airlines. For a moment, Imani could not process what she was seeing. You're Theodore Hartley's widow. Dorothy confirmed quietly. Theodore founded this airline 42 years ago. When he died 5 years ago, I inherited his shares. I own 34% of this company, which makes me the largest individual shareholder. Imani stared at her, uncomprehending. But, why are you here? In the regular waiting area, a sad smile crossed Dorothy's face. Because I like to see how this airline really treats its passengers. The executives put on a show when they know him, watching. But when they think him just another elderly woman traveling alone, she shook her head. I see things they would never want me to see. And today I saw that flight attendant stop you at the gate. I saw the way she looked at you, the way she spoke to you. I saw you follow her onto the jet bridge, and I saw Dorothy's voice caught. Through the terminal window, I saw her push you. I saw you fall. I saw her stand there and watch you lying on the floor. And then I saw her walk away. Dorothy's hands were trembling now. Whether with age or anger, Imani could not tell. My son Theodore Jr. is married to a wonderful woman named Angela. She's black. My granddaughter Maya is 15 years old. And she is one of the lights of my life. And I have watched her, over and over again, be treated as less than because of the color of her skin. When I saw what happened to you today, I saw my granddaughter. I saw every black child who has ever been told they don't belong. Before we continue, I need to ask you something important. Do you think Dorothy should use her power to help Imani seek justice? If you agree that everyone deserves to be treated with dignity regardless of their position in life, comment number 1 below. And if you have ever witnessed someone standing up for a stranger who was being mistreated, share that story in the comments because those moments of human kindness deserve to be celebrated. While you are at it, make sure you have liked this video and subscribed to this channel because what Dorothy does next will absolutely blow your mind. Now, let us continue with this incredible story. Dorothy had already begun to take action. While she and Imani were talking, she had made several phone calls in rapid succession, her voice calm and authoritative, despite the emotion clearly bubbling beneath the surface. The first call was to a man named James, whom Dorothy introduced as the family's personal attorney. "James, I need you at Atlanta International immediately. Bring the legal team." "Yes, all of them. He'll explain when you get here." The second call was to a woman named Margaret, the head of security for American Eagle's Southeast operations. "Margaret, it's Dorothy. I need you to pull the security footage from Gate B-17, specifically the jet bridge, for the past hour. All of it. And Margaret, don't let anyone delete anything. Consider this a direct order from the board." The third call was to the CEO of American Eagle, William Crawford. That conversation was brief and utterly devastating. "William, this is Dorothy Hartley. There's been an incident at Atlanta International. One of our flight attendants physically assaulted a passenger on the jet bridge, and it was caught on camera. I suggest you get down here immediately, unless you want to read about your resignation in tomorrow's newspapers." Within an hour, Dorothy had transformed a quiet corner of the Atlanta airport into a command center. James arrived with 2 junior attorneys in tow, all 3 of them carrying briefcases and wearing expressions of intense focus. Margaret sent the security footage to Dorothy's iPad, and when Dorothy watched it, her face went pale with rage. The video was crystal clear. You could see Patricia stopping Imani on the jet bridge. You could see the confrontation, Patricia's aggressive body language, Imani's defensive posture. And then you could see Patricia shove Imani with both hands, sending her tumbling down the sloped walkway. "We have everything we need," Dorothy said grimly, but she was not done. She had the airport doctor come to examine Imani, documenting every bruise, every scrape, every injury. She had photographs taken from multiple angles. She had Imani's torn and bloodied pants placed in an evidence bag. She had statements taken from Gregory, the ground crew worker who had witnessed the fall, and from several passengers who had seen parts of the confrontation from the aircraft windows. And then she looked at Imani and asked a question that would change everything. "How would you feel about being in a press conference in about 4 hours?" Imani blinked. "A press conference? The world needs to see what happened today, and American Eagle needs to answer for it. I can protect you, Imani. I can give you lawyers and resources and a platform, but only if you want it, only if you're willing to stand up and tell your story." Imani thought about her grandmother, who had worked 3 jobs for decades just to give her a chance at a better life. She thought about her mother, who had died believing that Imani would break every ceiling placed above her. She thought about Patricia Whitmore, who had looked at her and seen nothing but the color of her skin. And she thought about all the black girls who would come after her, who would board airplanes and walk through airports and wonder if they belonged. "Yes," Imani said, "he'll do it. Not just for me. For everyone who's ever been told they don't belong." Dorothy smiled. And for the first time since that terrible moment on the jet bridge, Imani felt a flicker of hope. But what would Patricia do when she found out what was coming? And would the video really be enough to prove what had happened? The answers were about to unfold in ways no one could have predicted. Patricia Whitmore was feeling rather pleased with herself as Flight 2847 cruised at 35,000 feet toward Boston. The incident with that girl, that scholarship case in first class, had been handled efficiently and decisively. Patricia prided herself on maintaining the standards of first class, and if those standards meant that certain people needed to be reminded of their place, well, that was simply part of the job. Richard Morrison, the businessman in seat 3B, had nodded approvingly at Patricia when she returned to the cabin after dealing with the situation. "You handled that well," he had murmured. as she passed. "Thank you." Patricia had smiled graciously. "Just doing my job, sir." Helen, the other flight attendant, working first class, had given Patricia a strange look, but had said nothing. Helen was young, idealistic, the type who probably believed all those corporate diversity trainings actually meant something. She would learn. They all learned eventually. It was not until the plane landed in Boston that Patricia's comfortable self-assurance began to crack. As soon as she powered on her phone, it exploded with notifications. 15 missed calls from the Atlanta office. 8 text messages from colleagues, each one more urgent than the last. "Patricia, what did you do?" One of them read. "Patricia, call me immediately. It's an emergency." Patricia's stomach clenched, but she told herself it was probably nothing. Maybe that girl had filed a complaint. That was to be expected. Patricia would simply explain what had really happened, that the girl had tripped on her own feet, and everyone would believe her because she was a 20-year veteran with an exemplary record. These things happened all the time, and they always blew over. She called Derek Collins, the shift manager in Atlanta, and his voice immediately told her that this was not going to blow over. "Patricia, you need to get back to Atlanta right now." Derek sounded scared. Actually scared. "What? I just got here. My shift isn't over until—" "Forget your shift. Dorothy Hartley is here." The name meant nothing to Patricia for a moment. "Who?" "Dorothy Hartley. Theodore Hartley's widow. She owns a third of this company. She was at the airport today. She saw everything." "And Patricia," Derek's voice dropped, "she has video footage. Security cameras caught the whole thing." Patricia felt the blood drain from her face. She gripped her phone so tightly her knuckles turned white. That's not possible. There's nothing to see." The girl tripped. "I watched the video," Derek said flatly. "She didn't trip. You pushed her." It was self-defense. She was being aggressive. She was. "Mrs. Hartley is calling a press conference." Derek cut her off. "The media is already gathering. You have 2 hours to get back here. A press conference." Patricia's voice rose to a pitch she barely recognized. "For what?" "A minor incident." Derek laughed bitterly. "A minor incident? That girl is going to Harvard Law School on a full scholarship. She's 19 years old. She never did anything wrong, and you pushed her down a jet bridge while calling her names. And now Dorothy Hartley, one of the most powerful women in American aviation, is about to tell the entire world what you did." Patricia booked the next flight back to Atlanta, using her employee benefits for what she suspected might be the last time. During the 2-hour flight, she sat alone with her thoughts, her mind racing through scenarios and justifications and excuses. She had done nothing wrong. She had been protecting the other passengers. That girl had been out of line, had been making a scene. People like her always made scenes, always played the victim, always tried to make everything about race. By the time she landed in Atlanta, Patricia had convinced herself that she would be vindicated. Yes, the video might look bad out of context, but once she explained the situation, everyone would understand. She had 20 years of dedicated service. Surely that counted for something. Surely the airline would not throw away a loyal employee over one misunderstanding with one difficult passenger. She was still clinging to that belief when she walked into the chaos that awaited her at Atlanta International Airport. The press conference was held in the largest media room at Atlanta International Airport, a space that could accommodate hundreds of people, and that was now filled beyond capacity with reporters, camera operators, and curious onlookers who had heard rumors of something explosive about to happen. Dorothy Hartley had not simply called a press conference. She had orchestrated a media event, and she had done it with the precision of someone who had spent 4 decades watching her husband navigate the cutthroat world of corporate aviation. Every major news network was represented. CNN had sent their top aviation correspondent. Fox News had a camera crew positioned front and center. NBC, ABC, CBS, and a dozen other outlets jostled for space. Their cameras pointed at a raised platform where a table had been set up with microphones and the American Eagle logo prominently displayed behind it. The room buzzed with speculation. Rumors were already flying about what had happened. Passengers from Flight 2847 had posted on social media about seeing a young black woman escorted off the plane by security. Gregory, the ground crew worker, had quietly shared what he had witnessed with friends, and that information had made its way to several journalists. The hashtag Justice for Imani was already trending on Twitter. Even though most people still did not know who Imani was or what exactly had happened to her. At exactly 4 o'clock in the afternoon, Dorothy Hartley walked onto the platform. She moved slowly, deliberately, every step radiating authority and purpose. Behind her came Imani, who was wearing a borrowed blazer and had her hair freshly arranged. And James, the attorney, carrying a thick folder of documents. They took their seats at the table while the room fell into expectant silence. At the far end of the room, William Crawford, the CEO of American Eagle, had been positioned in a chair that seemed deliberately isolated from the rest of the proceedings. His face was the color of old paper, and his hands fidgeted constantly with a pen he was not using. Dorothy leaned into the microphone and began to speak. Good afternoon. My name is Dorothy Hartley. 42 years ago, my husband Theodore founded American Eagle Airlines with a dream that the skies would be open to everyone, regardless of who they are or where they come from. He believed that air travel was a great equalizer, a way for people from all walks of life to see the world and expand their horizons. He would be horrified by what happened at this airport today. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle over the room. Today, one of our flight attendants betrayed everything my husband believed in. She looked at a young woman, a brilliant young woman who had earned a full scholarship to Harvard Law School, and she decided that this young woman did not deserve to sit in first class. She decided this based on one factor and one factor alone: the color of the young woman's skin. The room was absolutely silent now. Cameras clicked and whirred, but no one spoke. The flight attendant in question confronted this young woman at the gate. She questioned her right to be there. She made racist comments within earshot of other passengers. And when the young woman refused to be intimidated, when she insisted on her right to board the flight she had paid for, the flight attendant took her onto the jet bridge and physically assaulted her. She pushed her down a ramp, causing injuries that required medical attention, and then she walked away and left her lying on the floor. Dorothy's voice had grown harder with each sentence, her composure barely containing her fury. But, don't take my word for it, she continued. Let the footage speak for itself. The lights dimmed slightly, and a large screen behind the platform flickered to life. The security camera footage began to play, and the room watched in stunned silence. The video quality was excellent. You could see Patricia stopping Imani at the entrance to the jet bridge. You could see her examining Imani's boarding pass with suspicious intensity. You could see the confrontation that followed. Patricia's aggressive posture, her finger pointing accusingly, Imani standing with her arms slightly raised in a defensive position. And then, unmistakably, undeniably, you could see Patricia place both hands on Imani's chest and shove her backward. You could see Imani lose her balance and tumble down the sloped walkway, her body bouncing against the metal floor, her belongings scattering in all directions, and you could see Patricia stand there watching, making no move to help, before turning and walking back toward the aircraft. The footage ended, and the room remained silent for several long seconds. Then, all at once, chaos erupted. Reporters shouted questions, cameras flashed, and the buzz of shocked conversation filled the space. Dorothy raised a hand. and gradually the room quieted again. I would now like to introduce the young woman in the video. Her name is Imani Washington. She is 19 years old. She is the first person in her family to attend college. She earned a full scholarship to Harvard Law School through her intelligence, her hard work, and her determination. And today, she was told that none of that mattered because of the color of her skin. Imani stood up, her hands trembling slightly but her voice steady. She had practiced this moment in her head 100 times over the past few hours. But nothing could fully prepare her for the reality of facing 50 cameras and hundreds of eyes all fixed on her. "This morning, I woke up as the happiest girl in the world," she began. "I was about to start my journey to Harvard Law School. I was going to be the first person in my family to go to college. My grandmother has worked 3 jobs for most of her life just to give me a chance at a better future. My mother died when I was 12 years old. But before she passed, she made me promise that I would break every ceiling they put above me." Imani's voice caught for a moment, but she pushed through. "Today I was told I don't belong because of the color of my skin. I was physically assaulted for daring to sit in first class. I lost my grandmother's bracelet, a bracelet she saved for months to buy me. I lost the frame from my mother's photograph, the only picture I have of my family together." She paused, gathering herself. "But I'm not here for revenge. I'm not here because I want to see anyone destroyed. I'm here because this can't keep happening. Not to me. Not to anyone. No one should ever be pushed down because of who they are. No one should ever be told they don't belong." The questions came rapid fire from the assembled reporters. "Imani, what do you want to see happen? Mrs. Hartley, what action will the company take? Is there going to be a lawsuit? Has anyone been fired?" Imani fielded the first question with a poise that surprised even herself. "I want accountability," she said. "I want training. I want policies that protect passengers from discrimination. I want the next black girl who boards a plane to never feel what I felt today." Dorothy turned to William Crawford, the CEO, who had been trying to make himself invisible in his corner chair. "I believe Mr. Crawford would like to address the company's response." Crawford stood up, his legs visibly unsteady. He walked to the platform with the demeanor of a man approaching his own execution. He opened his mouth to speak, but before he could form a single word, the door at the back of the room burst open. Patricia Whitmore stormed in, still wearing her flight attendant uniform, her face flushed with anger and indignation. She pushed past reporters and cameramen, ignoring the security personnel who moved to intercept her, and stopped in the middle of the room. "This is ridiculous," she shouted, her voice carrying over the stunned murmurs of the crowd. "I have served this company loyally for 20 years. I have an exemplary record, and you're going to destroy my career over this. This." She pointed at Imani, her face twisted with contempt. "She was causing trouble. She was being aggressive. I was protecting the other passengers from her. Don't you see what's happening here? They're using this to push their agenda, to make us all feel guilty for." "The video shows otherwise, Miss Whitmore," Dorothy interrupted, her voice like ice. "Videos can be edited," Patricia shrieked, losing any pretense of composure. "This is a setup! This is all a setup! You people always play the victim, always make everything about race, always." The room had gone completely silent. Every camera now trained on Patricia, every microphone capturing her words. "I worked my whole life for this company," Patricia continued, oblivious to the damage she was doing to herself. "And you're going to believe some ghetto girl over me? Some affirmative action case who probably didn't even earn her way into that fancy school? This is what's wrong with this country. This is why everything is falling apart. Because people like her think they can just..." She never finished the sentence. Security had finally reached her, and they were firmly guiding her toward the exit. But the damage was done. Patricia's mask had not just slipped, it had shattered completely, revealing the ugly prejudice that lay beneath. Dorothy watched her go, with an expression of grim satisfaction. "I think Miss Whitmore just proved our point better than any video could," she said quietly into the microphone. The room erupted once again, and this time, no one even tried to restore order. The aftermath of the press conference was swift and merciless. Within hours, video clips of Patricia's meltdown had been viewed millions of times across every social media platform. The footage of her screaming ghetto girl at a 19-year-old Harvard scholarship recipient became the defining image of corporate racism, shared and reshared and commented upon until it achieved a kind of terrible immortality. American Eagle's stock price dropped 4% by the close of trading that day. The company's customer service lines were overwhelmed with calls from outraged customers threatening to boycott. Several corporate clients announced they would be reviewing their travel contracts. The PR disaster was so complete, so total, that William Crawford reportedly told his wife that evening that his career was over. The airline's board of directors convened an emergency session, while the press conference was still ongoing. Dorothy Hartley, as the largest individual shareholder, wielded enormous influence, but she was not interested in merely expressing displeasure. She wanted action, and she wanted it immediately. The decisions came down within hours. Patricia Whitmore was terminated, effective immediately. There would be no severance package, no letter of recommendation, no quiet resignation to protect her pension. She was simply gone. 20 years of service erased in a single afternoon because of 20 seconds of captured footage and the hatred she could no longer conceal. Derek Collins, the shift manager who had dismissed Imana's complaint and called security to remove her from the gate area, was suspended pending a full investigation. When that investigation uncovered a pattern of similar complaints being buried over the years, complaints from minority passengers that had been quietly dismissed without proper review, Derek resigned before he could be formally terminated. Richard Morrison, the businessman who had complained about sitting next to a black woman in first class and who had nodded approvingly when Patricia removed Imani from the plane, found himself facing consequences he had never anticipated. His company, a financial services firm that depended heavily on its public reputation, issued a statement distancing itself from his actions. Within a week, Morrison had been forced to resign from its board of directors. His name had become synonymous with entitled racism, and no amount of corporate spin could rehabilitate his image. For Patricia, the professional consequences were just the beginning. When she finally made her way home that evening, avoiding the reporters camped outside the airport by slipping out through a service entrance, she found her husband Robert waiting for her with a suitcase packed. "I saw the video," Robert said, his voice flat and cold. "I saw the press conference. I saw you scream at that girl in front of 50 cameras. Robert, I can explain." Patricia started, but he cut her off. "My business partners have been calling all afternoon. They want to know if I'm married to a racist. Our neighbors have been posting about us on the community Facebook page. Our daughter called me crying because her friends are sending her screenshots of you screaming about ghetto girls." Patricia felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. "I was defending myself. I was protecting the other passengers. That girl was. That girl," Robert interrupted, "is a teenager who earned a scholarship to Harvard. She never did anything to you except exist while black. And you pushed her down a ramp and called her names and then went on national television and made it 1,000 times worse." He picked up his suitcase and walked toward the door. "Robert, please, we can work through this. I made a mistake. He turned back to look at her, and there was no anger in his eyes anymore, just exhaustion and something that looked like disgust. "Don't come home tonight," he said. "I need to think about what I'm going to tell our daughter about who her mother really is." The door closed behind him, and Patricia stood alone in the entryway of the house she had lived in for 15 years, the house where she had raised her children and hosted dinner parties, and believed herself to be a good person. In the weeks that followed, the consequences continued to accumulate. Patricia's bank, where Robert worked as a senior executive, issued a public statement clarifying that she had no connection to the institution. The parent-teacher organization at her daughter's school asked her to resign from the planning committee. Her hairdresser, the same woman who had styled her hair for a decade, suddenly found herself too fully booked to schedule any appointments. Old friends stopped returning her calls. New acquaintances who met her at the grocery store or the gym suddenly remembered urgent appointments elsewhere. Patricia became a symbol, her face and her words used in corporate diversity training videos and academic discussions about unconscious bias. Every time the conversation turned to racism in the service industry, someone would bring up the flight attendant who had pushed a black teenager down a jet bridge and then screamed about ghetto girls on live television. Meanwhile, the positive changes rippled outward from the crisis. American Eagle announced a $10 million initiative to combat discrimination in air travel, including mandatory training for all employees, a new hotline for passengers to report incidents directly, and an independent review board to investigate complaints. Dorothy Hartley personally oversaw the implementation, making unannounced visits to airports around the country to ensure the reforms were being taken seriously. Gregory, the ground crew worker who had witnessed the assault and had tried to help Imani, received a promotion and a commendation for his courage in speaking out. Melissa, the customer service representative who had initially shown sympathy before being overruled by her manager, was also recognized for her attempt to help within the constraints of her position, and at the center of it all, Imani Washington watched the transformations unfold, with a mixture of exhaustion, gratitude, and cautious hope. She had not asked for any of this. She had only wanted to get on a plane and fly to college. But sometimes history chooses its moments, and sometimes ordinary people find themselves at the center of extraordinary events, and all they can do is try to make something meaningful out of the chaos. The private jet was small but luxurious. Nothing like the commercial flight Imani had originally been scheduled to take. Dorothy had insisted on arranging alternative transportation, and when Imani had tried to protest, Dorothy had simply smiled and said, "Humor an old woman. It makes me feel like I'm actually doing something useful." The flight attendant on this plane, a young black woman named Jasmine, who worked for a charter company Dorothy sometimes used, treated Imani like visiting royalty. She had watched the press conference on her phone during her break, and when she realized who was boarding her aircraft, she had actually teared up. "I saw what happened," Jasmine said quietly as she brought Imani a cup of tea. "I've been doing this job for 5 years, and the things I've seen, the way some people look at us, talk to us, like we're not even human. What you did today, standing up there and telling the truth, you spoke for all of us." Imani did not know how to respond. She was still processing everything that had happened, still trying to reconcile the nightmare of the morning with the surreal triumph of the afternoon. She sipped her tea and looked out the window at the clouds below, and she thought about how strange life could be, how a single day could contain both the worst moment and the best moment of your entire existence. When the plane landed in Boston, there was a car waiting to take her to Harvard. The driver, an older black man named Charles, shook her hand warmly and told her his grandson was applying to law schools next year. "You're going to change the world," Charles said. "I can feel it." Arriving at the Harvard campus felt like stepping into a dream. The old brick buildings, the manicured lawns, the sense of history and importance that seemed to radiate from every stone. Imani had seen pictures, of course, had studied the layout of the campus online, But nothing had prepared her for the reality of actually being here, of knowing that this was now her home. What she was not prepared for was the reception. Students recognized her from the news coverage, which had been playing on loop on every cable news channel for hours. They approached her in small groups at first, then larger ones, offering words of support and encouragement. "You're so brave," one young woman said. "I wish I had your courage." A group of black students from the law school's diversity organization met her at the entrance to her dormitory with flowers and a banner that read, "Welcome, Imani. You belong here." That night, after she had finally settled into her room and unpacked her meager belongings, Imani called her grandmother. She had been dreading this conversation, knowing that Eleanor had surely seen the news by now, knowing that her grandmother would be worried sick about everything that had happened. Eleanor answered on the first ring, "Baby." "Hi, Grandma." There was a long silence, and then Eleanor began to cry. Not the quiet, contained crying that Imani was used to, but deep, racking sobs that seemed to come from somewhere primal. "Grandma, I'm okay," Imani said quickly. "I promise I'm okay. I'm at Harvard. I made it. I know, baby, I know. I watched the whole thing on the news. I saw you up there, standing in front of all those people, telling your story. And you looked." Eleanor's voice broke. "You look just like your mama. So strong. So beautiful. So brave." Now Imani was crying too, the tears she had been holding back all day finally breaking free. "I was so scared, Grandma. I didn't know if anyone would believe me. I didn't know if I could do it. But you did. You stood up for yourself, and you stood up for everyone who's ever been treated that way. Your mama is so proud of you right now, baby. Wherever she is, she's watching. And she's so proud." They talked for another hour, catching up on everything Imani had not had time to share during the chaos of the day. When they finally hung up, Imani felt something she had not felt since that terrible moment on the jet bridge. Peace. The next few weeks brought a cascade of opportunities that Imani could never have anticipated. Her scholarship was enhanced to cover not just tuition and room and board, but also living expenses, textbooks, and a travel stipend. Several prestigious law firms reached out to offer summer internships, recognizing both her academic achievements and the courage she had displayed in going public with her story. Civil rights organizations invited her to speak at their events, to serve as a youth ambassador, to lend her voice to causes that mattered. Perhaps most surprisingly, she received interest from publishers who wanted her to write a memoir about her experiences. At 19 years old, with her legal career not yet begun, Imani found herself fielding calls from literary agents and editors who saw in her story something universal and powerful. But the gift that meant the most arrived 3 weeks after she started classes. It was a small package, carefully wrapped, with a handwritten note attached. "Dear Imani," the note read, in elegant cursive. "I know nothing can replace what you lost on that jet bridge, but I hope this reminds you that you are never alone. The skies belong to you. Fly high. With love and admiration, Dorothy." Inside the box was a gold bracelet, similar in design to the one Eleanor had given her, the one that had been lost forever in the crack of the jet bridge. It was not identical. This one was clearly more expensive, with small diamonds set into the clasp. But the style was the same, the sentiment was the same, and when Imani put it on her wrist, she felt a connection to her grandmother, and to Dorothy, and to all the women who had supported her along the way. She cried again when she read the postscript at the bottom of the note. "P.S. Theodore would have loved you." That evening, Imani stood at the window of her dormitory room, looking out at the Harvard campus spread before her. In her hand, she held her mother's photograph, now in a new frame that she had bought at a craft store near campus. The picture showed her mother and grandmother, and herself as a baby, all of them smiling, all of them together. It was the only family photo she had, and even though the original glass had been shattered, the image itself was intact. "I'm here, Mama," Imani whispered. "I made it, just like I promised." She knew the road ahead would still be difficult. She knew there would be more Patricia Whitmores in her future, more people who looked at her and saw only the color of her skin. But she also knew, now more than ever, that she was strong enough to face whatever came. She had been pushed down, literally pushed down, and she had gotten back up. She had told her truth in front of the entire world, and the world had listened. Whatever came next, she was ready. 3 years passed, each one bringing new challenges and new triumphs. Imani excelled in her studies, earning top marks in her classes, and distinguishing herself as one of the most promising young legal minds of her generation. She specialized in civil rights law, drawn inevitably to the work of protecting people who had been treated as she once was. It was in her final year of law school that she found herself standing in a federal courtroom, not as a student observer, but as a vital member of the legal team representing another victim of airline discrimination. A black businessman had been forcibly removed from his flight after a gate agent questioned whether his first-class ticket was legitimate. The case had echoes of her own story, and Imani had poured herself into the preparation, drafting motions and researching precedents, and helping to build the argument that would be presented before the court. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning with a verdict in favor of the plaintiff. $5 million in damages, plus a consent decree requiring the airline to implement sweeping changes to its policies and training programs. It was a landmark victory, one that would be studied in law schools for years to come. But the moment that truly marked how far Imani had come arrived a few months later, when she received an invitation to testify before Congress. The hearing was held in an ornate chamber of the House of Representatives, before the Transportation Committee, which was considering legislation to protect airline passengers from discrimination. Imani sat at a long table facing rows of lawmakers, cameras, and spectators who had come to witness what everyone knew would be historic testimony. 3 years ago, Imani began, her voice steady and strong. "I was pushed down a jet bridge because of the color of my skin. I was told I didn't belong in first class. I was told to go back where I came from. And for a moment, lying on that cold metal floor with my belongings scattered around me, I believed it. I believed that maybe I really didn't belong." She paused, letting the silence stretch. "But I was wrong. And the woman who pushed me was wrong. And every person who has ever looked at another human being and decided they were less valuable because of their race or their religion or their gender or any other factor beyond their control, they are wrong. We all belong. The skies belong to everyone. And it is long past time that our laws reflected that truth." The legislation she was there to support would be named the Imani Washington Air Passenger Protection Act. It would require all airlines to implement anti-discrimination training, establish independent review boards for complaints, and impose significant penalties for violations. It would become one of the most consequential pieces of civil rights legislation in decades. After the hearing concluded, Imani was approached by dozens of people who wanted to shake her hand, to thank her, to tell her their own stories of discrimination and prejudice. She stayed for hours, listening to each one, understanding that her role now extended far beyond her own personal journey. It was as she was finally leaving the building that her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Congratulations on your testimony. I watched the whole thing. I'm sorry. P.W." Imani stared at the message for a long moment. Patricia Whitmore. Even now, 3 years later, the name sent a chill down her spine. She did not respond, but she also did not delete the message or block the number. She was not sure why. She found out several weeks later, when she flew back to Atlanta to visit her grandmother. Eleanor was 81 now, frailer than ever but still possessed of the fierce spirit that had sustained her through decades of struggle. Imani spent 3 wonderful days with her, cooking meals together, looking at old photographs, talking about the future that now seemed so bright. On her last day in Atlanta, Imani went to the airport early to catch her flight back to Boston. She found herself, almost without meaning to, walking toward gate B-17. She had not been back to this exact spot since that terrible day 3 years ago. Part of her had been avoiding it, afraid of what feelings might surface if she returned to the scene of her trauma. But standing there now, looking at the ordinary gate area with its rows of seats and its departure board and its jet bridge leading out to the tarmac, she felt not pain but something closer to peace. This was where her old life had ended and her new life had begun. This was where she had learned what she was made of. She found a seat near the windows and settled in to wait for her flight to be called. She was reviewing some notes on her tablet when someone sat down in the chair next to her. Imani looked up and felt her heart stop. It was Patricia. The woman looked older than Imani remembered, more worn. The sharp edges of her face had softened, and there were deep lines around her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and difficult days. She was dressed simply, in clothes that were clean but not expensive, and she carried herself with none of the rigid confidence that had once defined her. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. "I didn't plan this," Patricia finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. I saw you sitting here. And I got your message," Imani said, keeping her voice neutral. Patricia nodded. "I didn't expect you to respond. I wouldn't have responded either." Silence stretched between them, heavy with history. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," Patricia continued. "I know I don't deserve it. What I did to you, what I said. There's no excuse. There never was." "You're right," Imani said quietly. "There wasn't." Patricia flinched slightly but did not argue. "After everything fell apart, I spent a lot of time thinking about why I did what I did. Why I looked at you and saw a threat instead of a person. Why I thought I had the right to decide whether you belonged." She paused, seeming to gather herself. "It wasn't about you. It was never about you. It was about me. My fears, my insecurities, prejudices I didn't even know I had until they destroyed everything. I lost my job, my marriage, my reputation, but worse than that, I had to face who I really was, and I didn't like what I saw." Imani listened without interrupting. She was not sure how she felt. The anger was still there, somewhere deep down, but it had been tempered by time and perspective. "What do you do now?" Imani asked. "I volunteer at a community center in Southside," Patricia said. "It serves mostly Black and Latino families. I teach English classes to immigrants. I help with after-school programs." Imani felt a flicker of surprise. "Southside. Her old neighborhood. I'm trying to be different," Patricia continued. "Not because it will undo what I did, because nothing can undo that, but because, I don't know, because it's the right thing to do, because I wake up every morning thinking about that girl on the jet bridge, and I want to be someone she wouldn't recognize." Patricia stood up, clutching her bag tightly. "I'll never stop being sorry, but I hope you keep flying high. I hope you break every ceiling they ever put above you." She smiled sadly. "I heard you say that in your testimony. It was beautiful." She walked away without looking back, and Imani watched her go, feeling something she had not expected. Not forgiveness, exactly, but something close to it. A recognition that people could change. That the story did not always end where you expected it to. 20 minutes later, Imani's flight was called. She gathered her belongings and walked toward the gate, her head held high. The gate agent, A young black woman with warm brown eyes glanced at her boarding pass and then did a double take. Imani Washington? The Imani Washington. Imani smiled. Just Imani. The gate agent's face lit up. It's an honor to have you on board. I watched your congressional testimony with my daughter. You inspired her to apply to law school. That's wonderful, Imani said, and meant it. She walked down the jet bridge, the same type of walkway where she had once been pushed to the ground, and this time she felt nothing but confidence. She found her seat in first class, because she had earned the right to be there, because she had always had that right, and because no one would ever convince her otherwise again. As the plane taxied toward the runway, Imani pulled out her phone and called her grandmother. Hey, Grandma. I'm about to take off. I'll be home in a few hours. You fly safe, baby girl. I will. I love you. I love you too. Your mama loves you. And she's so proud. We're all so proud. The plane lifted off, climbing steadily into the sky, and Imani watched Atlanta fall away beneath her. She thought about everything she had been through, everything she had overcome, everything that still lay ahead. And she realized that the lesson of her story was not about revenge or vindication, or even justice. It was about resilience. It was about refusing to let other people define your worth. It was about getting pushed down and getting back up, again and again, as many times as it takes. 5 minutes had changed everything, but it was not the 5 minutes that mattered. It was what came after. It was the choice to stand up, to speak out, to keep flying no matter who tried to push her down. The skies belong to everyone, and no one can tell you where you belong. So, there you have it. The incredible story of Imani Washington. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever faced discrimination and found the strength to stand up for yourself? Have you ever witnessed someone being treated unfairly because of who they are? Share your stories in the comments below because your experiences matter and they deserve to be heard. If this story moved you, please hit that like button and let me know. If you want to see more stories about courage, resilience, and the triumph of the human spirit, make sure you subscribe to this channel and click that notification bell so you never miss an upload. And please share this video with someone who needs to hear this message today because you never know whose life you might change. Thank you so much for watching, for listening, for being part of this community. May you always have the courage to stand up for what is right, the strength to keep going when the world pushes back, and the wisdom to know that you belong wherever your dreams take you. Until next time, fly high. This powerful story teaches us several profound lessons that we can carry with us throughout our lives. First, your worth is not determined by how others perceive you. Imani was told she did not belong, but she knew her value came from her hard work, her intelligence, and her character. No one else gets to define who you are or where you deserve to be. Second, speaking your truth requires courage, but it can change the world. When Imani stood before those cameras and told her story, she was terrified, but her bravery inspired millions and led to real change that would protect countless others from similar treatment. Third, unexpected allies can appear in the darkest moments. Dorothy Hartley could have walked past Imani and done nothing. Instead, she chose to use her power and privilege to fight for someone she had never met. We all have the ability to be that person for someone else. Fourth, resilience is not about never falling down. It is about getting back up every single time. Imani was literally pushed to the ground, but she rose stronger than before. Fifth, transformation is possible for everyone. Even Patricia, whose actions caused so much pain, found a path toward becoming a better person. This does not erase her wrongdoing, but it shows that change is always possible. Finally, the ceilings others build above us are meant to be broken. Your dreams are valid, your ambitions are worthy, and you belong wherever your hard work and determination take you. Now I want to hear your voice. Have you ever been made to feel like you did not belong somewhere? How did you find the strength to prove them wrong? Drop your story in the comments below because your experience could inspire someone who is going through the same struggle right now. If Iman's journey touched your heart, smash that like button to show your support. Subscribe to this channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss another story of courage and triumph. And please share this video with a friend, a family member, or anyone who needs to be reminded that they are worthy of respect and dignity. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here today. May you always find the courage to stand tall, the strength to rise when life pushes you down, and the wisdom to know that the skies truly belong to everyone. Keep flying high, and never let anyone tell you where you belong.